Hi guys, welcome to Refreshing Motherhood, and welcome my hubby as another special guest.
I'm here from the Refreshing Fatherhood channel. Thank you.
You should have a Refreshing Fatherhood channel. Anyways, we are here to do a
long overdue video.
Yes, long overdue. We talked about this on our vlogging channel, but we decided to post it on Refreshing Motherhood because this type of video just fits better on my channel. We are doing the financial Q&A. How we are living and surviving debt-free on a budget in expensive California, specifically.
On one income, single income family.
So we're just going to jump right into your questions. We have a few questions today that we're kind of going to elaborate on. So if you have any more questions, leave them in the comments down below, and we will keep this financial conversation going. So starting off, Gemina Guerrera asks, now that you're not working, did your budget suffer drastic changes? First question.
Yes, it definitely did. So back when we were both working, we were saving a lot of money. And basically what happened was when Tayler stopped working and after we had the baby and we dropped down to one income only, our savings slowed down significantly. Mm-hmm. So we did make some adjustments in other areas of our life, how much we were spending on groceries and stuff like that, to kind of just squeeze ourselves a little bit so that we can still try to keep saving as much as possible, but it definitely took a hit.
Yes. A second question to this is, did you plan this slowly so you didn't have to feel it? When I got pregnant, when we first found out I was pregnant, I think that first day we immediately looked at our budget and redid our budget just to have it mentally in our head of, okay, what do we need to prepare for over the next 9 months? So we definitely prepared for that.
And it was a slow transition because toward the end of Taylor's pregnancy, she was working less and less. So it wasn't like one day. Right,
and it was a constant revision of our budget. So we revised it when I found out I was pregnant, and we started saving specifically for like the nursery and baby items and things like that. And then once that was paid, like we had the money and we paid for that, then we revised our budget again, and we just kept doing it. And like Seth said, as I was slowing down working, we would revise our budget again. So the budget is not like set in stone. It's very much something that
moving target.
Yes, constant.
And it will always be that way.
For sure. Next question is from The Delightful Life, and she asks, can you do a video on showing your budget and how you decide where the money goes? I'm considering doing this plan, but I'd love to see an example. So this is kind of hard. We can tell you like how we do our budget and kind of the way that we break it down following Dave Ramsey's guidelines, and that is using a zero-based budget.
Yes.
So you want to explain it?
Sure. So the way you do a zero-based budget is you start off on the top line of a piece of paper. Easiest thing to do is to do it on paper, but on the very top line of the piece of paper, you write down how much your monthly, if you want to do a monthly, write down how much your monthly income is. That's combined take-home pay, you and or your husband. Then that's how much money you have for the month, and you slowly start allocating on paper, on purpose, where each dollar is going to go until you reach zero. You don't leave any money floating, you don't leave any money unassigned, if you will. So the first thing that Tayler and I do, and we have our budget laid out, the first thing we do is we take 10% and we tithe to our church with that. That's just something that we feel is right to do. And if you choose to do that, whether or not is up to you, really. So we do that. So then that automatically takes 10% of our monthly income out of the question. Then we do the major things like living expenses such as rent and utilities and fuel and food, and you just slowly start chipping away at it until you reach zero. So basically the way that we orchestrate it is we determine how much you want to spend in all of the areas, and our very last line, if you will, is saving. That's always what is like varies the most, is how much we're saving. And really it's our passion to be able to save significantly that keeps that number high. It's not like an afterthought. It's not like, well, we only are going to save $50 or $100 this month. Like, no, like we want it to be hundreds of dollars. We want it to be as big as possible. We want our savings to just jump up every month, to leap forward and not just like stay the same or bounce around.
So now you might be asking, okay, if I do that and I get to the bottom, I still have bills to pay and I don't have any money left. And that's what happens when you have credit card debt and car payments and things like that. And if you're starting this from a place in debt, don't be discouraged. You can totally get there. You still do your budget the exact same way. You just list all of your bills from the most important to the least important. And then you start following the...
and instead of doing any saving, you're attacking your debt. So you're paying down debt instead of savings. And the way you do that is the debt snowball, which is described in his plan, where you list your debts from smallest to largest and you pay them off one by one, not including your house. Really, there's a lot of information, and it's hard for us to give you an entire glimpse of the plan. All I can say is it's a fantastic course.
And the course that he's talking about is Financial Peace University. So usually churches around the area will offer them like multiple times throughout the year. So if you're really, really like interested in this and you really, really want to do it,
the first link in the description down below will be a link to...
Yeah, and I would recommend doing that because there's so much information and you will just set yourself up for success if you put like your all into really diving deep into all the information and learning it.
And don't get us wrong, we're probably making it more complicated than it needs to be because it is painfully simple. There's nothing to it. Literally, you don't even have to have graduated high school in order to understand the Dave Ramsey personal finance plan.
This is kind of a question, but Travis and Mackenzie said, I cannot for the life of me get the cash envelopes down. I've tried so many times and I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Okay, envelopes are tricky and those are something that you might have to edit month to month. It took us a solid like 3 months to get our budget like working,
pinned down, yeah.
And then I would say another 3 months to make it like seamless to where we don't really have to think about it unless an event happens like pregnancy or something like that. So the envelope system is basically you want to take anything that fluctuates through the month. So for us, our envelopes are food. Number one is the most important. We have one for home, things like toilet paper and paper towels. Yeah, like home, items.
Necessities.
We have entertainment, so for us to go on dates or if we want to go out to eat, like that's part of our entertainment. We have an envelope for Denver, so her monthly needs like diapers and things like that come out of her envelope. And then we have our own envelopes,
personal money.
Personal allowance is what you call it. And that is basically where you get to spend whatever you want with your money and you don't have to worry about you don't have to agree on it. Like if I want to spend all of my money on clothes, then that's fine. And he can spend all of his money on tech and that's fine.
It's a very, very small number.
Like I could probably buy maybe a pair of underwear.
No.
And you could probably buy
a pair of underwear?
A fancy pen.
No.
I'm just kidding, but it is really slim. We don't.
We keep that slim because we want our savings. We both agree that we want our savings to be moved forward.
And that's just a personal preference for us, is we would rather sacrifice on getting blow money for ourselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the envelope system is really hard. So what you want to do is you put the cash in the envelopes, and if you're struggling with doing a monthly envelope system, try doing it like bi-weekly, like every 2 weeks, and it breaks it down into smaller portions because sometimes we struggle with like spending it all in the beginning of the month, and then the end of the month we're just like...
We have gone several times, if you follow our vlogs, we've gone like the last 2 weeks of the month with no food in the fridge. And we're just like,
what are we going to make today?
What do we do? Like calling it our parents, like, hey, can we like come and crash your fridge because we got no food?
So that's probably something we should try, is doing it every 2 weeks. But it's helpful to kind of break it down for you and to take it a little bit smaller so that it's not so overwhelming of having all the cash in the beginning of the month.
Correct.
And if you find at the end of the month, like, this is not working, we literally cannot survive, we cannot afford groceries on this amount, then raise it a little bit.
It means you need to raise it. Exactly.
And then on the other hand, if you're like, wow, we have all this extra money, let's go buy steak, let's go do this, maybe you should take it down a little bit. Like, really, like, stretch yourself, like, encourage yourself to be like stretched a little bit outside of your comfort zone and see what you can manage. We kind of answered this question, but we'll elaborate a little bit more. This is from Maggie Rubio. She said, great update. Can you please do a video where you show how you budget each month, which categories you have for the envelope system? Living in California is so expensive. I often wonder how people have extra money after bills. California is definitely expensive. It is no joke. we could probably be a lot farther in our like financial plans if we did not live in California. But
where we live is beautiful and we love it.
And our family's here.
I would say that when you're doing the budgeting process early on, if you do have debts, be that credit card and or car payments and stuff like that, debts other than your home, it can be really like discouraging because the money that you're bringing home every month doesn't go very far down the list of things that you want to be able to fund for the month. And so the best advice that I can give you is to attack that debt and eliminate it from your budget entirely, and it gives you so much more flexibility throughout the month. Tayler and I worked really hard the first 18 months basically of our marriage, and we paid off $60,000 in debt.
And that is basically
that was making huge sacrifices.
Yeah, and that is how we can now have extra money after bills, because we cut all of our bills away, except like our living expenses that you can't cut, like rent and utilities. So
another way that we are able to live in California with a single income is we're renting. So the honest truth is right now we cannot afford to buy a home in California on my one income. We can't. We have to save more money to create a bigger down payment, and then hopefully in the future also I will be given a raise, make more money, and we will be able to afford it. But the truth is right now we can't. So a lot of people will overexert themselves and their finances early on in their marriage by buying a house that they can't afford. And if you are in that situation where you're paying 30 or 40% of your take-home pay is your mortgage payment, then you really could just benefit from going through the course step by step, because it lays everything out and decisions that you should be making, whether or not you can afford the house or can't afford the house. It's kind of a harsh reality, but that's one thing that luckily we never got ourselves in that pickle, and we just said, you know what, we have one bedroom, we're sharing it with the baby, and it creates some complications with Tayler and the baby sleeping and all of us like waking up at the same time, and it's definitely an inconvenience, but it's what we can afford right now.
And I think that I want to just clarify the definition of what you can afford. So a lot of people think, oh, I can afford this car payment, it's only $150 a month. And the fact of the matter is that you cannot afford it if you have to make payments on it. If you have to make payments on a vehicle, you cannot afford that vehicle.
With the exception of a home.
With the exception of a home. Like that's a purchase that you could spend your whole life like trying to save up that much for.
Spoiler alert, the only debt that the Dave Ramsey plan really allows you to have long term is a mortgage. But it's under a configuration of a 15-year fixed rate mortgage with at least 10% down up front.
So for us, like that's what we're striving for. And we tell people we can't afford to buy a house, and they look at our finances and they say, oh my gosh, like you're first time home buyers, you have the 0% down option, you can get a great interest rate over 30 years, you can totally afford it. And according to those terms, yes, we can. But realistically, that's not what we want, and that's not what we can afford long term.
The amount of interest that you save in paying to the bank in a 15-year fixed rate versus a 30-year fixed rate is huge. Huge.
Unbelievable.
And your payment's only a couple $100 extra, really.
Yeah. So I think that I just wanted to clarify that the definition of like bills for us are straight up necessities. We do not have any payments. Like we worked really hard to buy our car in cash and to not have a car payment, to not have any credit cards.
We're also already, even though her car is brand new, we are already funding and preparing ourselves for the next purchase of a car. We are saving. It's called the sinking fund. We're throwing a little bit of money in a savings account that's specifically dedicated to a replacement car, because we know it's not a surprise that car will not last forever.
Right.
And so it would be foolish of us to wake up in 5 years and realize, oh my gosh, how are we going to afford a car in cash?
So the last question today is from Whitney Connard, and she said, I would love to hear any tips you have on affording health insurance on one salary. This one is a hard one, and this one sucks because health insurance is ridiculously expensive.
Yeah.
And unfortunately,
shout out to all my Canadians out there who are getting it for free.
I know, you lucky ducks. Anyways, health insurance is a tough one. We don't have necessarily like any specific tips for you other than if you cannot find a job that offers health benefits, then you have to build it into your budget. And obviously that's going to be right up there with like rent and things like that. It's going to be at the top because it's something that you have to have. And so you might have to make sacrifices in your budget elsewhere in order to make that work.
One thing I think goes without saying is don't skimp on health insurance. And they talk about that in Financial Peace University, that when it comes to things like health, you don't want to try to cut corners because
you never know.
You never know.
And I think that Dave Ramsey does do a great job of listing out different healthcare plans and which one is the best
for
option.
Your stage of life.
Yeah, for your stage of life. So I would encourage you to check that out. And just kind of talking about like your budget in general and like sinking funds and things like what we were saying. Basically, our budget consists of tithing,
rent.
Home funds, rent, utilities, savings is obviously at the end. And we have things like a phone sinking fund that happens every year. Apple introduces a new phone. One of us gets a new phone. So we have that kind of like set aside. We have the car sinking fund set aside.
Basically, every time an unexpected expense occurs in our lives, we add it to our budget somewhere. Just most recently, we realized that, you know what? We're going to like 2 or 3 weddings every year. And every time that happens, we're like, how are we going to afford a $40, $50 present? Because literally every single dollar in our budget is accounted for. There is no wiggle room, not even for $50. So we said, you know what? Fine. We're going to add that into our budget so that every time we have to go to a wedding, 2 or 3 a year, we know that we've already allocated money for that and saved it and set it aside.
And we have been doing our budget for over 3 years, and that's a change we just recently made because we realized again and again, where is this going to come from?
Exactly.
So I think that what you have to do for your budget is list out things that you know that you're going to have to spend money on, write them all out, do a budget, and then just watch it. Watch what happens. And when something comes up like, oh my gosh, we need a new phone, add that in, start building that in. And that's how you're going to get yourself into a place where you feel really comfortable with your budget and where your money's going. And when an expense happens, it's not a stressful situation and you don't have to go back into debt in order to afford it.
The last piece of advice I want to leave you guys with real quick is it happens very often that you or your spouse may be very adamant about living on a budget and doing this, but the matter of fact is if you are both not on the exact same page and in complete agreement on what the budget is, it's going to fail.
100%.
There's just no way around that. So that's one of the most important parts. You might have a budget that you have in mind that's written out, and your spouse might have a different opinion on some of the numbers, and all I can say is meet in the middle. I might not want to spend as much as we do on hair and makeup products, but if it means that Tayler and I can come to an agreement on a budget as a whole and restrict ourselves and hold ourselves accountable, then it's worth it.
Yeah, for sure. So definitely work together as a team, and that is the only way you're going to succeed. So I hope that we kind of gave you a little bit more of a glimpse into how our budget works and how we kind of survive in this day and age with no money. We so broke.
No money. We so broke.
Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. And I will see you in my next video. Bye. Today I am talking about leaps. What the heck are leaps? What are the wonder weeks? And why do they matter to you as a mama of a new baby?